Welcome to the Hazmat Files podcast, where science meets the street and first responders get the edge they need to stay safe in an increasingly complex world. In this episode, we're pulling back the curtain on one of the fastest evolving hazards in the field, the chemical chaos behind illicit narcotics production and clandestine labs. From fentanyl-laced powders that can kill with a single touch, to makeshift meth labs rigged with explosive potential, today's responders face threats that are not only toxic but also invisible. I'm your host, Erica Fisher, and today we'll explore the chemistry behind these substances, the telltale signs of an illicit lab operations, and the critical response protocols that can mean the difference between life and death. Whether you're a hazmat technician, law enforcement officer, or EMS provider, this episode is packed with insights to help you recognize, respond to, and survive the hidden dangers of the narcotics underworld. Before jumping into the chemistry that could save lives, a quick note. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests, and do not necessarily reflect the positions or opinions of TransCare or its sponsoring organizations. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or professional advice. Now it's time to welcome back to the Hazmat Files one of our previous guests, Adam Weiss.
Thank you so much, Erica, for having me back. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
We're so excited to have you back on. To give a little bit of background, Adam is a nationally registered paramedic with over 36 years of field medical experience, both in the country and abroad. He currently teaches in several medical programs. Adam serves as the training center coordinator for 2 National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians sites, where he also fills the role of program associate faculty. His responsibilities include assisting potential centers to meet accreditation, certifying instructors, and teaching first responders and members of the military. Adam has an extensive background along with decades of operational downrange experience in the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive, and special operations community. Adam has served in the role of chief on a FEMA Type 1 hazardous materials CBRN response team. He is utilized by the United States as well as foreign allied militaries as an instructor in damage control medicine, CBRN operations, incident command and management, small unit tactics and explosive ordnance, and counter IED operations. Adam has also been utilized as a subject matter expert for the state and federal government, providing testimony and at times acting as an advisor. He has served on the Department of Homeland Security, Office of Science and Technologies, Technical Solutions Working Group. He has been involved in the planning as well as execution of dozens of national special security events. He has been a downrange responder to several acts of chemical and biological terrorism on U.S. soil. Lastly, Adam is a native of South Philadelphia and is a diehard Phillies, Eagles, Flyers, and Sixers fan. Adam, it's great to have you back on the Hazmat Files. With your extensive experience in field medicine, hazmat operations, and CBRN response, you bring a unique and valuable perspective on today's topic. Let's dive right in. To set the stage for our listeners, let's start with the basics. Adam, what exactly defines an illicit or clandestine lab, and what types of threats do they pose?
Well, Erica, illicit is going to be the illegal function of the lab. The clandestine portion is going to be the hidden. So they act hand in hand. It doesn't matter whether it's going to be a meth lab, an explosives lab, a chemical or biological lab. The fact that it is both illicit and clandestine give the intent as to what they're doing. The threats that they're going to pose will be the same as any other lab that we're going to face. There's going to be fire, explosion, oxygen deficiency, the possibility of toxic inhalation. It's pretty much everything that we're going to find inside the ERG.
And as the landscape continues to evolve, so do the tactics behind these labs. Adam, how do you see these threats changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think right now we're doing a great job. We've come full circle from the 80s and the 90s where we didn't have that awareness level training. I think that we've done a great job with situational and spatial awareness. Having said that, I believe that within the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to get more creative with these labs. I think that we're going to see a whole lot more. People are buying property right now legally, creating storefronts, doing everything as a legit business. But under the cover of that clandestine operation, they're digging tunnels, finding newer methods, and they understand how it is that we're looking for them. So they're trying everything that they can do to defeat our means to find them.
And whether they're planning to manufacture drugs, explosives, or chemical weapons, each of these labs can be equally dangerous, as you said. Can you break down how the hazards differ or in some areas overlap across these types of labs?
So the labs right now that don't overlap would be the biological or radiological. We really don't see the fire explosion, oxygen deficiency, or anything of that sort in those type labs. But as it relates to drugs, chemicals, that's pretty much synonymous. The same thing with explosives. Altogether, the three of them use a lot of the same precursor materials. So we have that really strong fire explosion, oxygen deficiency. We'll say that a lot. Toxic inhalation, oxidation, things of that sort. Oxidizers can absolutely be unstable and just go on their own. So these are the hazards that absolutely overlap.
And with these risks, spotting a lab before it becomes a full blown incident is critical for first responders. What are some of the biggest red flags responders should watch for?
That's a great question. And this is where we push that awareness to our first responders in the field. We like to break this down into three separate components. So in homes on the response, out of homes around the curtilage or on the property, and then what we see inside the community. So inside the home itself, we're looking for people that aren't throwing their trash out. In general, when we have a lab, 1 pound of product produces roughly 6 to 8 pounds of trash. So if you see somebody inside the house that is not throwing their trash out, it should give you that index of suspicion to believe that there's something wrong. Glassware, lots of glassware inside the house, Pyrex, because it holds really, really good heat, especially when making explosives as well as biologicals. Different smells. A lot of times we get into the house and we have that smell of urine, of ammonia. These are definitely indicators that there are processes undergoing or precursor chemicals there. 5-gallon buckets, petri dishes, fans, any type of filtering system, an augmented or homemade system. And then obviously all the different precursor chemicals. There's many precursor chemicals that go into making explosives, making drugs. And for us to have that situational spatial awareness to see it and understand it allows us to make that call out of the homes. How much trash is being produced by a single household? There's actually a statistic on what a normal family produces in the matter of a couple days or in the matter of a week. What is the trash cycle like? Does the trash come every 2 weeks? Is it every month? These are all things to look into. And then inside the community, do your check-ins. Go to your local Walmart, go to your drugstores and find out, are there large amounts of Sudafed being purchased or Pyrex or precursor chemicals? Did somebody come in and buy 300 bottles of acetone-based nail polish? And then the last would be making the dump run, going down to the local dump and just taking a look, talking to the people at the actual front desk who run the actual dump to say, this person's coming in a lot. They're bringing an extreme amount of trash in. And as I said earlier, 1 pound of product roughly yields 6 to 8 pounds of trash. So these are all things that we need to look at.
And as you mentioned, the situational awareness for first responders is critical when it comes to these labs, especially since over half of disaster-related fatalities among first responders are due to structural collapse, fire, or explosion, all of which could occur from one of these illicit labs. Specific to law enforcement, accordingly to the preliminary data from the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, the number of line of duty deaths in 2004 increased 25% compared to the previous year. And investigative and enforcement duties, which includes drug-related matters, wanted persons, and traffic stops, are also significant contributors in law enforcement deaths, based on the data from the FBI. With the risks so high, especially for law enforcement, what steps should all first responders take upon arrival at a suspected lab site to protect themselves and others?
This is a great life or death question. I think the most important thing that we could do right off the bat, besides awareness and understanding, is be deliberate with our movements. We don't need to rush, right? This isn't a let's get in and get this over and done with. We need to be smooth and methodical, and we need to think out our next step. isolating and calling for special services if you're not a trained response unit, especially if you don't have the proper PPE. Ensure that we set the proper perimeter for what it is that we're dealing with. If we have a chemical threat that's inside the house, the chemical threat may also bring fire, it may also bring explosion. If we believe that we're dealing with an explosives lab, it's going to be the same thing. So ensuring that we're making notification, issuing shelter in place, issuing evacuation, but most important, don't rush, be methodical, call for those special services. A lot of these labs are yielding booby traps and IEDs. And even beyond that, even that immediate threat, there's always the threat of cancer. So when you're going into these labs unprotected and you don't have the proper PPE, you may not have that acute effect right now, but it might be that chronic effect 10 years from now where you find that you have some obscure lung cancer or brain cancer because of the exposure that you had.
And fentanyl labs have made headlines for their extreme danger. What makes these setups especially hazardous, and how are response protocols adapting to them?
The direct exposure is the most important threat that we're going to see inside these fentanyl labs, and not even the fentanyl labs. We're back to a lot of different things drug-wise. We see lots of different drugs out in the field like xylazine. We're back to speedballing like they were back in the 80s where cocaine's being mixed with fentanyl now. There's big fentanyl parties that are being had. We had an assignment not too long ago where we had 5 family members that were partaking in fentanyl with each other. I believe we used somewhere in the area of about 130 milligrams of Narcan just to be able to get all 5 together up to a respiratory status where they didn't have to be bagged. So ensure that you have a good stash of Narcan, for lack of a better term. If you are going downrange as the actual responder, you're a police, fire, law enforcement, make sure that you're not touching anything that you're not supposed to be touching. Make sure that you have your gloves on. Try to limit any sort of contact with furniture, with the breezeway, with the doors, anything at all. I also firmly believe that if you're wearing a short sleeve shirt, maybe as you're going in on a response that you put your turnout coat on or something to cover up your arms. The last thing that you need is any sort of accidental exposure to your skin because of short sleeve shirts. Situational and spatial awareness, paying attention to your surroundings, being deliberate, being methodical. And like I said, don't rush with our movements.
Responding to these incidents requires a team effort. How do law enforcement and hazmat teams coordinate on scene, and what does this collaboration look like in practice?
So I think all of this starts with creating the relationship early. Far too often, we have law enforcement, fire, and EMS that don't talk to each other, let alone train with each other. When you have special responses like this, it's going to be a unified event. You're going to have law enforcement there as they have crime scene technicians, possibly an emergency response team or SWAT team. Fireside may have hazmat. EMS may have their mass casualty component set up. So we have to talk. We have to establish expectations and what our objectives are. What are our expectations of each other? Because each of these agencies has a large stake in the actual incident itself. If we could start training together early, we come up with this plan, it's going to be much smoother of a response. There's a lot of agencies currently that don't have hazmat teams as far as their fire departments, the local fire departments, so they have to have a regional or a county team. In some areas, law enforcement agencies run the hazmat team or the clandestine drug lab team. Same thing goes as far as the bomb squad in some areas, some municipalities. I'm located in the state of Maryland, so we have many municipalities that are fire-based bomb squads. In order to be a bomb technician in the civilian world, you also have to be a hazardous material technician, and then some of us will go on to the rank of specialist. At the end of the day, it's going to be based on relationships. If we could start the relationship early, we're well ahead of the game.
That's absolutely true. Training together is critical. When we talk about law enforcement, what are some areas where you'd like to see more training or awareness, especially for officers who may be the first to encounter these labs?
I think that more awareness level training, we cannot push enough awareness level training. I think the information that we get from the fusion centers that are showing us what trends are out there should be pushed down through the chain of command to the boots on the ground. I think with the right amount of awareness level training, and if we push more for situational and spatial awareness, I think we're going to do that much better.
And even for the non-hazmat responders, being able to prepare and have that awareness level training is key because preparedness is everything. How important is pre-incident planning and training for these types of incidents, and what best practices should departments follow?
So once again, that goes back to the relationships. If we could form the relationships, we immediately put on the table what the expectations are of each agency, as well as the objectives of what we're looking to do downrange. If we could plan together, if we could train together, this is going to put us ahead of the curve. We know in the old emergency management phrase of proper mitigation, proper planning is going to lead to that smoother response and hopefully the better recovery.
For departments looking to build or expand their internal training programs, where can they start? What resources or organizations can they tap into?
So there's so much that's out there. You just have to be able to find it. I'm a big fan on reading, but reading a book isn't enough to carry us through an actual operation. We have to tap into our local fusion centers. Within the local fusion center, we're going to have training, our fire academies, Chemtrec, TEACS, the Texas A&M Extension Program, National Fire Academy, EMI, FEMA, and the Emergency Management Institute for the independent study, local fire and police academies. There's so much training out there. I just recently did a training in St. Mary's County for the Lexington Park Volunteer Rescue Squad. They were interested in some hazmat response, so we broke down and did a class for them on hazmat response, and it provided more of a situational and spatial awareness. It's not just tankers. We looked at the conventional as well as the illicit and nefarious means. Reach out to those who have done it. Reach out to the agencies. Reach out to the companies. There's a lot of companies that are out there that are doing training. Make sure that you're vetting and validating these agencies to ensure that they have the proper credentialing to teach these classes. I always feel that word of mouth is pretty strong. I know that as far as downrange solutions, we really don't advertise. Most of our education that we provide is through word of mouth, through other military agencies, law enforcement, so on and so forth. But there's definitely a lot that's out there.
It's good that there are resources that first responders can call upon to get some additional either awareness level or more specific specialized training. When we talk about clandestine labs, there are a lot of misunderstandings around them. What are some common misconceptions that you'd like to clear up for both responders and for the general public?
So we see this all the time. We see this in domestic and international terrorism as we're chasing down cases and we're interviewing the neighbors. And I preface it with interviewing the neighbors. Nobody really believes that it could happen in their neighborhood. It doesn't matter if you're in a $500,000 home in an affluent neighborhood. It absolutely can happen. We have to go back to that situational and spatial awareness. We're paying attention to everything that's going on. We're paying attention to how people act, the amount of trash that they put out, odd smells, who's showing up at the house at 2:00 in the morning. Obviously, if you have a residential home and somebody's bringing a delivery truck around at 2:00 in the morning, there's an index of suspicion to believe that something's off. Why would somebody be doing that? I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that it has to be done in an urban, economically depressed environment or in the backwoods where nobody's going to be able to see. It could absolutely happen in your own neighborhoods. And we look at several of the domestic and international terrorism cases here in the United States, and they were planning, in fact, in their own nice residential neighborhood.
Smaller or rural fire departments may not have dedicated hazmat teams. Adam, what advice do you have for those agencies that could still encounter these types of threats?
I go back to we build the awareness, we build the situational and spatial awareness. And I know I've said that 1,000 times. I probably sound like a broken record, but it is absolutely a key point. If anybody could take anything away from this podcast that we're doing today, it's to increase the level of awareness training that's out there, and then to increase that level of spatial and situational awareness that you have, as well as be deliberate in your operation as you're going down range. Don't rush. We don't need to rush in. Make sure that we're wearing the proper PPE. There's a lot of things that are out there. There's a lot of grants that are out there. We have to apply for those grants while they still exist. Same thing as far as the training. But there's a lot of things that we are using right now, all the way down to drones and robotics, the different technology. Learning about booby traps, that's something very simple. It's a very simple exercise. It's a very simple drill. Reach out to your local National Guard unit. If you have a military unit that's explosive ordnance disposal unit, reach out to them. I'm sure they would absolutely love to create a PowerPoint for you. We have so many partners that are out there. We just have to create the relationships. And I know I've said relationships 1,000 times, but It is an absolute key point. If we're not creating relationships early, we're hampering our response.
Relationships are so critical in all types of responses and technology too, and it's changing the game throughout many industries, including emergency response. Are there new detection tools or techniques that are helping responders safely identify these illicit labs?
Absolutely. So we have a lot of the same basics as always. We have our 5-gas and we have FLIRs and different meters and GCMS to run samples, and we have infrared spectroscopy and ion mobility spectrometry, and we have drones that have the ability to carry a technological payload to be able to read the environment, O2 deficiency, LEL, VOC, things of that sort. We also have a handful of things that are currently in the R&D phase, both on the government side as well as the state side. I think that if you become extremely versed and very proficient, very literate with what you have, we have the ability to create that gap analysis of what we may not have on scene. So even the most simple of the 5-gas meters, obviously it's not going to tell us what's there, but it's going to tell us what's not there. So we have to really pay attention to what we have. There is a lot of stuff that's out there. There's also some high dollar material, especially as it gets into radiological and nuclear.
And we discussed a little bit prior some of those signs that the public can be looking for within their own community. And it's critical because the public plays a large role in this too. How can community awareness and reporting help in identifying and mitigating clandestine labs before they escalate?
I think that's one of those things where we need to have the relationship with the community. So once again, it goes back to relationships. What type of medium do we have? What type of platform do we have? Because nobody's going to want to say, hey, I'm Joe Smith, and I believe my neighbor over here is running a clandestine drug lab. We want to be able to keep it anonymous. We want to be able to protect people. We want people to be able to feel safe and that there's not going to be any sort of retribution after the actual complaint. So we have to ensure that our medium or our venue is going to keep them anonymous. But I think if we push out into the public back like we did in the 2000s, see something, say something, I think that we just do the same thing. We make sure that our law enforcement entity is out there pushing towards Crime Stoppers, things of that sort. We have many different programs nationwide, but as long as we're actually trying to build a relationship with the community, I think that we'll have some good results.
And that community members also taking an active role in this prevention. And once the immediate threat of a lab is mitigated, the job still isn't over. What does environmental remediation look like after a lab is shut down, and why is that so important?
After the first responders leave and the lab is actually shut down, in the cases of the labs that I've worked, we'll shut it down and then there's a secondary lab. There's also a little period of time where after we lock it up, we keep it as long as it's not going to be a threat to anybody in the event that we have to file for a second warrant to get back into that property. Once everything has been established that there's going to be no need to get back into that property, there's private companies that will come out to actually do the remediation. So although the main threat, the cookware, the glassware, all that stuff has been dismantled, taken apart, the actual threat agent itself has been neutralized and taken for sample or for evidence, we still have the rugs to deal with. We still have the sheetrock and the drywall. Anything inside that house that is contaminated based off of the off-gassing of the material. There's lots of different OSHA laws, and each state, like in the state of Maryland, we have OSHA laws that apply. It is a contaminated site. We talk about sericides and things of that sort. Once again, it comes back to relationships. In the event that something like this happens, let's say in the jurisdiction that I live, I know that the downrange response team has a relationship already with a private resource company that's going to come out to take away that sheetrock, take away anything in there where the off-gassing could have laid into.
Their real focus is addressing and handling those secondary threats and making sure that the site is safe in the end. Adam, thanks again for joining us on this episode of the Hazmat Files. It's always a pleasure hearing your insights, and we really appreciate you sharing your expertise with our listeners. Looking forward to having you back again soon. There's always more ground to cover with your background, knowledge, and expertise.
Erica, thank you so very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here on the Hazmat Files.
And with synthetic opioids and improvised chemicals on the rise, staying informed is critical for your safety and the community's. Remember, illicit labs can be hidden anywhere and are packed with toxic, flammable, or reactive chemicals. Add in booby traps, armed occupants, and environmental risks, and it's clear. No scene is safe without proper assessment. Always wear the right PPE, establish control zones, and coordinate among all the responding agencies. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay ready, and we'll see you next time on the Hazmat Files.